Good morning, and it's wonderful, or good afternoon. It's wonderful to be with all of you as we discuss the state of the nation and also the state of the world. My name's Ferial Haffajee. I'm a journalist at the Daily Maverick, and today we are joined by the Deputy Minister of Public Works and Infrastructure, Sihle Zikalala. Thank you for being with us. By the National Spokesperson of the Democratic Alliance, Willie Aucamp. Very welcome to a first webinar at the Daily Maverick, and then to one of our seasoned panelists, Prof. William Gumede. Always the greatest pleasure to be joined by you to help us navigate a tough moment. So, gents, I was really hoping that today we'd be able to discuss a State of the Nation address, which I very much felt was a workhorse of an address. At the end of it, I thought there was a lot to be optimistic about. But the context found us very much on the defensive. And our country is in the strange position of being in the crosshairs of one of the most powerful presidents in the world, the US President Donald Trump. What do we do now? I think that's going to be a question that's with us for all year. So while this speech, the SONA speech, had the title or the theme of "We will not be bullied," as the president began to respond from what was coming out of America for all of January. In fact, it's my contention that we are being bullied. And I thought that I might ask you, Deputy Minister Zikalala, to kick us off. Do you think we are being bullied? And what's our ability to stand our ground on this one? I can't hear you, sir. I think you're still muted.
Thanks a lot, Ms. Haffajee, and thanks for hosting us. Greetings to you and all fellow panelists in this discussion. I think we must thank you for hosting such an important discussion. Yes, I think the question whether we are being bullied or not, the context in which the state of the nation was presented, of course, is characterized by a global world that is affected by many challenges, as well as the recent elections in the US and the President Donald Trump coming into office with a number of policy directions that seek to change the relations with America. However, as South Africa, we believe that we are going to restore relations with the United States. We believe that our diplomacy is matured enough. We have always remained committed to building a global community that is characterized by peace, democracy, and development. So the decision by the president to send an envoy, not only to Washington, but to a number of countries, will help to advance the position of South Africa on all issues that are affecting the world, but as we also prepare for our G20 summit to be held later this year.
Thank you. Is that envoy, Mr. Sidney Mufamadi, our national security advisor? Are you able to say, and are you quite confident that the relationship can be re-embroidered? It does seem to be at a position that it was a very long time ago, at least 3 decades ago, the fracturing of this relationship between South Africa and the US.
Now, I'm confident. I won't be able to confirm names. I don't believe it will be an individual. It will be a delegation. But I think the first step to the right direction was the appointment of Ambassador Rasool back to United States. And I think that is the first step that will enhance a relationship. Secondly, I believe that America is open for engagement. They've not reached a point where they've closed doors for engagement. We have in the country been articulating differences, but I believe we are also beginning to see the alignment of voices to respond toward this issue.
Thank you very much. Willie Aucamp, would you like to come in here on your hopes for whether we can at least begin to rethread that relationship with the US, and why is that important?
Thank you, Ferial, and thank you for the opportunity. It's very nice to speak to you, and hello to all my panel members. Ferial, when you speak about international relations, it is always a very balancing act a very difficult balancing act that you've got to thread. We are reliant on the United States of America for AGOA, for example, where we export a lot of specifically manufactured products as well as agricultural products to them. And those exports go out without any tariffs being asked on that. So it's very important that we try to protect our relationship with the United States of America. They are, well, we export about 7% of our export products go to the United States alone. I'm not even talking about partners of the United States. If you talk about the European Union, etc., it's much higher. But it is such a difficult thing to balance that out. We know the ideological background from South Africa's side with regards to different trade or relationships that we've got in the international world. From the Democratic Alliance side, we are of the opinion that this problem that we've got with the United States of America at the moment can be solved. But we need cool and calm heads to solve this. We all know and saw that President Donald Trump do what he says he's going to do. If somebody thinks that these are idle threats, they are mistaken. President Donald Trump really does what he says he will do. So we must have that in mind when we approach them. We must make sure that whoever is going to make decisions about South Africa has got all the right facts on the table. We welcome the fact that there will be a delegation going, and I can also confirm that the Democratic Alliance has, over the past years, sent delegations to the United States of America where we've pleaded with them not to punish South Africa for wrongs of the past in the last 30 years when it comes to foreign relations and international policy, but that the United States of America must know that South Africa is not the ANC anymore. It's the ANC in a government of national unity now, and we knew a few years ago already that these changes will take place. So it's very important to foster relations with our biggest trading partners all over the world and to make sure that sound minds and adults in the room are present when those decisions are being taken.
Thanks, Willie. Just a quick follow on my part. I think that it's clear that we'll have sound minds and cool and calm collected spirits at the table. I wonder if that can be said for the same tables we'll meet in the US, where the spirit of that country, its ability to negotiate, is changing almost every day and in real time, as we've seen, where diplomacy happens largely on social media. It goes through that washer, and then eventually you'll get a different position coming out when you are able to sit at tables. But don't you need the same kind of resolve from both sets of partners? And does that exist in your reading of things in the US at the moment?
Ferial, you are 100% correct. Everybody that's going to sit around that table must have that same way of thinking. And I firmly believe that the United States of America has got that. It's just a matter of distrust over many years. If you look at the point of view from America's side, South Africa has in the past taken the sides of people that America does not align to. We went through a lot of trouble to get Iran part of BRICS. Now, we know that the United States of America is almost a sworn enemy of Iran. When the war in Ukraine started, South Africa said that we are going to be neutral, we're not taking sides. whilst we all know very full well, and the United States of America also know that, is that the Lady R was here in South Africa, in Simonstown, that South Africa is doing war exercises or military exercises with Russia. They clearly know that we are not that neutral as we portrayed to be. And then the 7th of October, Hamas attack on Israel came, and all of a sudden South Africa spoke out against Israel. So the neutrality that we spoke of weren't there. So from the point of view of the United States, they might think that South Africa is always taking the wrong turn, in contrast with what the interest of the United States of America is. And that is what they are trying to influence with the influence that they might have over us. Whether that's right or wrong, that is not the discussion on the table now. I'm talking about the point of view from the United States. And we need to take that into consideration when we're going to negotiate with them. I'm quite sure that the president will send a very strong delegation. And from the Democratic Alliance side, Ferial, it's very important to state that over the years, we have built up a huge trust relationship with the United States. And I believe that the delegation that we will send from our side as well will be to assist the delegation from government itself, and with one aim in mind, and that is to foster our trade relations, protect AGOA, and protect the aid that we are receiving from the United States.
Thank you very much. Prof. William Gumede, I thought I might just share a little something with you as you take us, because this is very much your world. Last week, I had an interview with the G20 Sherpa, who is Zane Dangle, also the DG of DIRCO, and he said that all the people that they had been negotiating with and whom they knew in the State Department and who would be our counterparts in these meetings that are going to happen are gone now. So Washington is a very, very different place. How do you read the moment, and also what do you think is the potential of finding counterparts with whom you can begin to restore this relationship?
Thank you, Ferial, and thank you for Daily Maverick for inviting me, and also thank you for those who are here and listening to the conversation. I think the first thing, is the important thing is I want to emphasize what Willie was saying in terms of we need grown-ups, we need maturity from the South African side. Obviously, you know, we don't determine the other side, but from our point of view, it's going to be really, really important. Whoever is sent, and I'm going to come back to this, there has to be a pragmatism. So the first thing, maturity, grown up, and we can't resolve this issue with the US on a Cold War mindset or ideological mindset or emotional mindset. So, I mean, that really is, I just want to put that aside. But very, very importantly also that it has to be fact-based. The US is very important to South Africa, and it appears that many ordinary citizens may not think so. And when the president made his first statement, for example, which I thought was a mistake, there was a line there with him as a mistake when he said that we only get $400 million US of development aid from the US, and that's only for HIV/AIDS. That's absolutely wrong. That is very, very wrong, and so on. And I'm going to come back just to show you the extent of the US. The US may not be our biggest trade partner, but the US, what it provides us, it is not just traditional development aid from US aid. We get money also from other US government departments. Then we get money from foundations, from individuals, from public institutions, from universities, from US NGOs. And then there's the companies of the US that create over 500 million jobs. And it's not just ordinary jobs. We're talking here about, in the manufacturing side locally, and so on. And then we have the cultural exchanges. Young people leave here from South Africa, they get scholarships, they go to the US, your cultural exchanges, sports exchanges. So, the package, a full package of it. So it's not just it's far beyond the narrow trades and far beyond the developmental aid. But the kind of funding that we're getting from the US is actually the kind of funding where the state fails. So that's very important. Social development and our health side and the education side, All of those places of state failure in our country, that's the kind of money that builds state delivery and state capacity. So it's very, very important to understand. And then related to that, there's often I hear glib responses from some senior politicians who say, well, we can de-link and just move on to trade, for example, with China or with Russia. Now the world doesn't work. I mean, that is that's ignorance, and it may not be from a point of meanness, but from a point of ignorance. It is very difficult to do a de-linking overnight. That's the first thing. But secondly, let's just take China, for example. And China is our biggest trading partner, but it is a narrow trade. It is the Chinese. We're trading with them, but they're bringing their products here, they manufacture products here. They will send us a car that's already manufactured. So what that does, it causes deindustrialization. Whereas the US, their trade actually build industrialization. That's through industrialization. We create the jobs, we can deal with poverty, we deal with inequality, and so on. But when you bring in things already manufactured, sort of the Chinese model of development, it causes deindustrialization. I mean, we've already seen 2 weeks ago that our car manufacturers were complaining. We know our textile industry has been deindustrialized because of the Chinese. We know our steel industry is about to be deindustrialized also because, of transport. So that's the difference. And then we don't get the other dividend that we would get out of the US or even from the EU, the dividend of the Chinese don't have, the kind of foundations, the kind of those sort of development aid that, in a traditional sense, the exchanges, the innovation exchanges. So we don't get that. So it is to put it from a fact-based point of view is, the kind of trade that we're trading with the US and even with the EU and so on is a trade with a multiplier impact on our economy that actually multiply and help us deal with our poverty and unemployment. But the trades that we get, let's just say from a Russia or from a China, we don't get that multiplier impact and so on. So, it's very key to understand. So let me then come back just, to the US itself. I think we have to look at it as tactical. The Trump administration, their tactics is a tactical issue in terms of first, put it on social media, sort of big bang. And then the second one would be make it excessive, and then you come to the negotiating table and you draw it down. So if you look at all, it was the same. It was with Mexico, with Canada, and so on. So that's there is, when you negotiate, sometimes there's some people that negotiate that way, and so on. And then the other part of it, I think we also must take responsibility as a country that we are also, our previous governments, pre-GNU governments actually brought us here. We've been telling, myself and many others have been warning, the ANC government, when it was still the ANC dominant government, that, policies that we take, there's consequences for policies. And the policies must always, when you're a mature governing party and not a liberation movement, because the difference between a liberation movement and a governing party, liberation movement governs in its interest of the party and ideology and so on. So a party that governs a country is much more looking at the interest of the country. Now, that will mean that every policy will have to look at, is this in the interest of the country, in the interest of unemployment, poverty, and so on, or is this in the interest of the party, ideology, or past friends? So it's a big difference. So if all of this, the Trump sort of this type of attack on South Africa, if it means that we are actually taking responsibility for what has brought us here, I think it would be a good thing. Also, so that's very important to understand. Maybe just the last one on it is really on the envoys, because that's very important. I think it is very important that when the president sent an envoy or envoys, that we take it as South Africa Incorporated, meaning it's the ANC, the GNU partner, but it's also business and civil society and other South Africans with the expertise. And then for me, the last one, which is absolutely critical, is to bring in the South Africans that are in the Trump camp in the US and make them part of the envoy pool. Very important.
Who, like Elon Musk?
I mean, there are many,
No.
many others.
Okay, good to hear.
Everyone's going to sit
I
on the
just
other side.
I do want to pay homage to the SONA a little bit, and then we come back to the US. So, Deputy
Ferial,
Minister Zikalala, yes,
Ferial, sorry,
yes,
if I can
Willie,
just
sure.
quickly come in there, I want to latch on with what Prof. William said there. I think it is so important to look at the holistic benefits for all South Africans. And if you look at the relations that we've got, it is so important that a foreign policy must never put ideological solidarity ahead of the life changes of desperate South Africans. And I think that is unfortunately where we've been in the past. We must look at this holistically and the total benefit. It's one thing to import a car from a company I'm not going to mention. We actually manufacture the car here. We manufacture parts. We've got a lot of jobs that is created through that. And we must look at the benefits of having that. So ideological solidarity should always play fiddle against the life-changing effects that can be implemented for South Africans that are desperately in need of.
We'll
Can I
ask
come
the
in on
DM
this
to,
point?
yeah, please you can, and then I'll ask about yellow
I think
machines.
it will be incorrect to accept that the South African international policy has only been driven by an ideology. Our relationship with the countries of the world is defined by, one, the creation of peace, two, democracy, three, development. Two, it is a historical fact that developed countries are developed because they benefited a lot from developing and underdeveloped countries. And therefore, alliances that are developing based on common interest cannot be at the jeopardy of the country. And our engagement at a global level is to promote the South African interest, not the party interest alone.
Thank you very much. We're going to come back to striking that balance on a whole number of things in the GNU era. DM Zikalala, I do want to ask you about, for me, what really caught my ear in the SONA was, I've heard it many times, but we do seem to be getting closer to this infrastructure bonanza. The president named the Polihadi Dam, the bridge, and also the Bohbai Harbour as examples of infrastructure projects which we should see this year already. Tell us how that 100 billion rand could have a multiplier effect into our economy, because we are going to need it. It's going to, I think we're going to be knocked by either trade tariffs or trade relationships with the US. How could this begin to offer a different form of growth?
It will help us to bring growth in a decentralized way that take development of South Africa as a whole. This is a result of the work that started in 2020 when the president announced that the infrastructure development will be a flywheel for economic recovery. Since then, we have been packaging number of infrastructure projects. 68 of about 280 are already under construction. So we are going to see this infrastructure roll out throughout the country. But what is good with projects that have gone through project preparation through Infrastructure South Africa and Infrastructure Fund is that they seek to ensure that development of infrastructure is spread. You have spoken about the Bohbai, SEZ, and the green hydrogen project that will be developed there. It is in the area which you will see that it is like isolated and underdeveloped. We are also talking here about Operation Ukuvuselela, which is the resuscitation of the railway from Tshwane to Gqeberha, and that will offload the traffic or the volumes that goes through Durban. We are talking of number of projects, to Bridge between KwaZulu-Natal in Eastern Cape, which will connect KwaZulu-Natal and Eastern Cape, will help in shortening the distance. And therefore, this development covers the entire South Africa. There is no province that is left out. But secondly, this will see a development of some critical infrastructure in the economic cluster, such as our ports, the port of Durban, the port of Richards Bay, the Gqeberha, the Saldanha, continuous development in those ports. But this will also cover areas such as water, where a number of dams are going to be constructed. Energy is one area where we will invest infrastructure development on energy.
And so it was exciting to hear those things from any of you, or perhaps you could just say, Mr. Zikalala, it does seem to me that we're establishing a competitive energy market where Eskom isn't the only game in town. I was listening to the Cape Town mayor at the press club where he said the city could now buy energy more cheaply from IPPs. Do you think that's something we're going to see in the country? And will that be a way of sustaining the end of load shedding, which was also another big highlight in the speech for me?
Yes, it is what we will see, but it does not mean we should neglect Eskom. We'll continue to build the capacity of Eskom, continue to separate functions, generation, distribution will be separated. And therefore, whilst we give space for competition, that does not mean we should collapse Eskom.
Thank you very much. Willie Aucamp, what were some of your highlights as you listened to the speech? Obviously, as a member of the GNU, you had insight. I saw, for example, was really interested to see how the president, till 2 hours before, was consulting the GNU partners in a Zoom call to make sure that there was a comprehensive buy-in and unity for this important address. What piqued your interest in your ears as you listened?
Ferial, just to latch on what you said there, I think we are all growing and we will, by the day, get more mature in this GNU as well. And the more that we speak to each other, the more that we show respect to each other and have interactions with each other, the better things will go. The Democratic Alliance is extremely proud that there were several DA policies that were incorporated into the speech. We heard a lot about public-private partnerships that must take place in the infrastructure sector, in Eskom. Just talking about Eskom, the moment that you're getting something more competitive, people tend to work better, smarter, harder, and produce a better product at a lower rate. We cannot continue to have all these excessive high increases at Eskom. Let's get the private sector involved. Like the mayor of Cape Town, Jordan Lewis, said, we can now buy electricity cheaper at other places. Again, that is to the benefit of every South African, not necessarily the government alone or old ideological issues with regards to having state-owned entities all over the place. So the private sector involvement in energy production and transmission is one of those things that the Democratic Alliance has long been pushing for. The prioritization of infrastructure investment, also again through public-private partnerships. As a government, we cannot fix South Africa alone. We need the assistance of the public and the private sector out there. They've got knowledge, they've got skills. We are such a great country to invest in. If you look at infrastructure development, we saw that when Theodore Roosevelt started in the USA many years ago to rebuild America by doing infrastructure development, and that was followed up by a lot of other world leaders all over the world. especially after World War II. The moment that you put in money into infrastructure, that infrastructure project will be to the advancement of every person in that country. Let's say we take a harbor, like the Deputy Minister just said there, or a bridge that's being built. People get benefit out of that. It makes it easier to trade. If you've got a proper road and proper bridges and a proper harbor, you can export more easier, and that leads to growth in your economy. And if we've got to get the private sector involved in that, that would be the best thing that we can, because they can really push this forward. Another thing that we are very glad in, that was in the speech, is the digital transformation that the president spoke about, to keep South Africa competitive in the global economy by reducing the bureaucratic inefficiencies and opportunities for corruption. That will definitely be a big thing that we can stop with that. If you look at the work that Dr. Leon Schreiber, the Minister of Home Affairs, is doing with regards to visa reforms that's aimed at attracting skilled workers and entrepreneurs to boost our growth. Everything, Ferial, must be about growth and job creation. Economic growth is so important. We cannot fix South Africa if we don't grow the economy and if we don't create jobs. And there was such a lot of issues. The first half of the president's speech was about that. And what was also very nice for us was the fact that the president highlighted the work that DA ministers are doing in this government of national unity. Minister Dean McPherson of Public Works and Infrastructure has said from day one, he wants to turn South Africa into a construction site. In doing so, creating better services, creating jobs, and the more jobs you create, obviously, the less people are dependent on grants, the more people can pay for their own goods and have respect for what they are doing. So that is so very important, Ferial.
Thank you very much, Willie. So, William, I know you and I are both Joburg people. I can't wait for those yellow graders and machines to get here as well, because our infrastructure also needs a boost, and cities are so important. But you wrote last week saying that the GNU is working well. It was a nice long view piece, because when you're in a power sharing arrangement, it can always feel like, oh my goodness, it's going to fall apart. And we did have a couple of moments with the DA declaring dispute, that it looked like things might come apart, or the wheels might come off. How do you think that it was expressed in that State of the Nation address last week?
I mean, the first thing is, it's obviously very good that the president talk about infrastructure, and he introduced a couple of new things. But what I worry, and really worry, is that, is it new funds for infrastructure? I mean, for people like me who's been around, we've been talking about, even during the Zuma years, of the same amount of 800 billion rands, and we've never seen where the money goes, previous sort of money is, and we've seen it repackaging all the time. And I think that's very, very frustrating. So I think it's going to be important to unpack that, and infrastructure is absolutely critical for economic growth and to deal with our poverty issues and our unemployment issues. And the fact that we've had a decline in our infrastructure is actually one of the reasons why we don't have the 3% growth. Why we've had since 2012 a 0.8% GDP growth every year, which is actually the second lowest growth rate in Africa, consistently over a couple of decades. And I think, many of our growth potentials are actually being decimated by a decline and the neglect of infrastructure. For example, if the president had announced no new funds for infrastructure, but the president had only said, look, we're going to fix the current infrastructure, fixing current infrastructure. And I know there's a low, let's call it like, it seems like an unexciting way to get growth or give us growth. Let me just repeat that. So if the president announced no new funds for infrastructure, but he only announced a really genuine attempt to deal with the neglected infrastructure, not new infrastructure, the neglected infrastructure will give us a 3% growth, just to understand that. It is very important. Okay. So, and then what I've been worried about also is that in the president's speech, the president is not dealing with the impediments to growth and to deal with poverty and unemployment. So what are those? Start off with the neglect of infrastructure, obviously one of them. But you know, the lack of rule of law. 2 weeks ago, the taxi associations were accused in Mpumalanga of burning 51 Patco buses now, and it means that there's no property rights, no rule of law for businesses and for people to start new businesses and so on. That is very important in the State of the Nation address, because as a president, you know, he gives us the line. You know, so all new initiatives, whether it's infrastructure or other kind of initiatives, if there's no rule of law, it will all disappear. I mean, you think about a construction mafia. So if the president and his announcement of new infrastructure now, the infrastructure, let's say, is going to be built somewhere in KwaZulu-Natal or in the Northwest Province, and there's the infrastructure mafia, the construction mafia, they grab the project and the funds and nothing's going to happen. So that is when I say the impediments to growth. That's very, very important. The president, you know, it was missing in the SONA speech. The second one, for example, just something like, you know, the incompetence in the state. I mean, state failure is also one of the reasons, state and SOE failure, for why we have low growth and why we're not dealing with our issues, with our poverty and unemployment issues. So we haven't seen much, I mean, in the SONA was very, very thin and very empty on dealing with that impediment. And again, I'll give you an example. If we just reduce corruption, between 10 and 20%, not in all parts of the state, but just in the mission critical departments of the state. You know, we've got mission critical, there are mission critical departments that they're important to function because they deliver growth, and then there's others is much more just administrative. If for example, I mean, the government would just reduce corruption and mission critical, not in all of the places, that again will give us that 3% growth. So can you see, I mean, what are the big bang stuff and so on, but just target it and deal with this, and the same with, you know, competence, because part of our state failure and SOE failure is competence, you know. So the idea of cadre deployment where political people get appointed. So if we just, again, if for example the president had announced and say, look, I will introduce competence only in a mission critical government department and SOEs. The others will do what they need to do, you know, in the same way they operate. And that's the Chinese model, is where they focus on a mission critical entities and departments and there's competence. In the rest, they sort of allow passionaries, it's administrative on, and the impact is not that big. That, if the president announced that again would have given us that 3% growth rate. So, I mean, in a nutshell, that really is my disappointment.
Thank you very much.
I don't know whether I
highlighting
can
those areas. Yes, please.
I think, with due respect, and I respect Prof. Gumede, it is unfortunate that I believe he is underplaying the progress that we are making. The progress in terms of reshaping and ensuring that we strengthen our SOEs. If you talk about Eskom now and the improvement that we are seeing, it tells you that there is an effort. If you talk about Transnet, the improvement we are seeing from Richards Bay, Cape Town, Durban, Gqeberha Port, you see that there is a great progress to improve the performance of our state-owned entities. And we must not speak as if the public sector is incompetent and only the private sector can deliver. I think that theory will not be helping us. Developmental states have proven that if you've got strong state organs, they play a role even in changing the economic structure and addressing socio-economic development. The projects that are being implemented, it's not just figures. These are projects that we started planning from 2020 when President Ramaphosa said, let us focus on infrastructure as a flywheel to rebuild the economy. Among those, I can confirm that 600 million have been invested in the student accommodation in Sefako Mahato University. I can confirm that Mtento Bridge is under construction. We have a list of completed projects. We have a list of 82 projects that are under construction, and we have a list of projects that are planned. It should also not be like things are happening now because there are new parties in the GNU. The work started long time ago. It started in 2020. The president spoke about the participation of the public, of the private sector. We already last year presented 12 strategic infrastructure projects as part of the construction book. And through ISA and Infrastructure Fund, we have managed to get the participation of the private sector in some of these projects. And therefore, the work started some time ago, and it will be wrong to politicize and claim easy victories over the work that have been done over a period of time. And it is wrong to not acknowledge when there is progress. It's important that we acknowledge progress. There is work that has been done in dealing with the construction mafia, and I think that statistics talk for themselves. Whether you talk of Western Cape, Eastern Cape, and KwaZulu-Natal that were highly affected by this challenge of construction mafia.
Thank you very much. Lots of questions here. Willie, a quick response, then we must go to our questions before we run out of time.
No problem. Ferial, the biggest problem that we've got with the speech is the urgency. It's promising that was said, and there's a lot that we agree with, but we need to radically speed up the pace with which these reforms are going to take place. In particular, the competitive energy market that we just spoke about, there must be actions within the next 12 months. Port concessions must take place by the end of this year and rail concessions by early next year. We've got to do these things at a very urgent rate. And then with regards to just what the Deputy Minister said there, you will always have your state-owned enterprises. But we saw over the many years that's gone by that the ability of those state-owned enterprises to execute the job in the benefit of all South Africans and it being corruption-free and productive, it's very, very difficult for them. Public procurement, for example, it must prioritize efficiency, effective service delivery, and value for money, rather than focusing on set-asides that fail to deliver on promises of better public services. We need to deliver these services, and by getting the private sector involved.
Okay. I think Willie, I think we've just lost you for a moment, but you will have more time to wrap at the end. I'm going to run through questions and then can decide who's going to take them. Hayley Napier, what can South Africa do to support the Palestinians in Gaza, whom Trump wants to forcibly remove? Then from Dr. Joan van Niekerk. So we all know Joan as the one of our biggest protectors of children. She says that there are huge concerns re the USAID funding. Sorry. My apologies. She says that there are huge concerns about the USAID funding withdrawal and its impact on children and families. I know that some of the Joburg child welfare services have had to quickly be stopped. Then Mosima Mahamata, a very big commenter today, saying the taxpayer, we're funding grant recipients of over 6 million. It's actually a lot more than that, Mosima. And what he's arguing for is for conscription and to create a new army, because I think he's looking at the DRC there. Fernando, there's a consequence to outdated ideological mindsets. The world has moved on. What does this new multipolar world look like? I'm also thinking a lot about that. So Patrick, more crackdown on government waste, fraud, and outright theft. Josephine is saying, I think I was snarky about Elon Musk, and she says he should be included in any delegation. So I accept that. Where else are we? Michelle, speaking about critical minerals and the importance thereof. Shall we get to a few of those? And then Luduma, I think, interesting question. SA needs to appreciate that we're a small open market economy and our potential is limited by this reality. We have to build internal capacity to trade and intensify the diversification of goods and our services offering. That's right. I was reading last week that exports of apples to Thailand was just arranged, and that's the kind of new trade routes which are so essential for us to develop. So may I ask Mr. Zikalala, you want to go first, maybe take a stab at the Palestine and any other questions that caught your ear?
Yes, it is our view that the situation of Israel and Palestine should be resolved through peaceful means. And we believe the ultimate solution is the two-state solution where both coexist independent of each other with no interference. And therefore, we must follow the UN processes that try to mediate there. Another question that I need to answer is about the delegation, the composition of the envoy. We have a history of sending envoys. I think under the late Minister Gordhan, we had a delegation that included government, business sector, the trade union, and civil society. And it would not be for the first time. And that inclusive approach that we are referring to, and number of people have suggested, will help to talk on behalf of government of South Africa and the people of South Africa. Engagement must be with countries, government to government, but also business to business and all other sectors. I think the issue of building internal trade is quite important. We must focus on manufacturing and ensure that we grow the economy in all sectors. Agriculture, as we are talking about apples, we have a market with China, we have a market with Europe, which we are servicing. So we need to support all of those initiatives, but what is more important is to look on industrialization to grow the economy in the country. Finally, I will not leave this comment about public procurement. Public procurement should help us to deliver quick, fight corruption, but also address the injustices of the past. And therefore, it will be wrong to say set aside are not important. They will not be important for those who inherited benefits from the apartheid era. But to address the historical imbalances, we do need to have interventions that address, that empower those who were oppressed. And that's why Treasury is expediting the finalization of regulations that will help department to implement the Public Procurement Act.
Thank you very much. William, do you want to come in on some of the questions? I really do want to hone in on Joan's question a little. I mean, the most vulnerable South Africans are feeling it so quickly. You know, one of my mentees works in TB extension services, and she was saying not only is she at home now, but the people who are so reliant on these services do not have it, and they were cut off very, very quickly. There's hundreds of thousands of stories like that today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's so important that that we see this as perhaps the biggest crisis of our economy. And this is not a superficial issue. Now, often what I do, often when political leaders ask me, how do you respond pragmatically and strategically, as a country. So I say, you know, sometimes just look outside, you look at Brazil and India, because I think if we are a little bit confused, that's sort of those two countries are part of our BRICS partners, and they used to be part with us, IPSA. You know, they offer us often a better guide. Brazil right now has kept absolutely quiet. I mean, you know, they've been tactically quiet in the response to the US. And I'll tell you why, because, you know, Brazil absolutely needs the US because, you know, German economy is busy tanking. So a lot of Brazil's exports to Germany, for example, you know, it's not happening. And China is you know, it's a slowdown also. So a lot of Brazil's traditional things that I would export to China is not happening. So they have to be tactically really, they have to be strategic and tactical how they respond to the US. Now look again at India is our other, you know, partner, an example. I mean, India actually proactively lowered their tariffs for the US. Repeat, they proactively, before even ask, lowered their tariff from it's a tactical way of responding. So these are all grown-up responses. There's no emotions in it. There are no ideology in it. It's just sort of for India is what is India's interest. They've analyzed, you know, the Trump administration, what is happening. The same with Brazil. You know, what is their interest? What is tactics? What is strategic? So I mean, I just, you know, just to give you a sense of that, I would even say, look, that we may have to, because if we say this is a crisis and it's one of our biggest crises, we may have to even to recall our friend Ibrahim Rasool, who is the ambassador in the US. I mean, he's a competent, good, I know him very, very well. We've got very good relations, but maybe we may have to find somebody else to do it. You know, let's look at the demographic and the ideological view of the
But
Trump.
can I ask, isn't that capitulation rather than tactical maneuvering? Because I mean, there's also the sphere of your sovereignty and your own interest, and isn't a tactical position to say, okay, then we're going to build BRICS. So Anne-Marie Slaughter wrote a very good piece on Project Syndicate, where she said you're seeing the rise of what she called the middle powers. And we are in that grouping. And if you look at Ghulam Balam of Standard Bank overnight, a piece where he's looking at how the new trade relationships are forming quite powerfully outside of the US very quickly. Isn't that tactical to play in that area instead?
So we have to play in all of the areas. So you know, I agree with all of those different areas, but now we are dealing in real life. You know, so, you know, there's real life. We're in real life now. There's no ideology. We're not, in fact, it's real life. We're a real life crisis here in front of us, and we have to think on our feet, but we have to think like grown-ups. So if I would advise the president to say, maybe we could find maybe a Tony Leon, maybe somebody else who would fit in easier in that game of demographic to engage with the Trump administration. But secondly, maybe in terms of, you know, on that sovereignty, and yes, we are obviously we're an independent country, but you know, but let's unpack sovereignty only sadly is dependable on the strength of the economy in our world now. In the past, maybe during the Cold War, but right now, if a country's economy is big, that's actually the strength of its power. Think about Saudi Arabia, for example. 30 years ago, it was, you know, it was a sub $1 trillion US economy. Now it's a $1 trillion economy. It is powerful. It has to be consulted, and you know, its sovereignty is very, very strong. Our mistake the last 20 years, I mean, we've allowed from, you know, the country to decline compared to our, you know, our peers. So we are sitting with, you know, a 500 billion US dollar economy where we should be sitting at a 1 trillion billion GDP economy, and it's all of our own fault. So our sovereignty has declined; it has not increased, and that's our problem. And now we're fighting for our life. We're absolutely fighting for our lives here, for our economic life. And when I say we're fighting for our economic life, we're fighting for every South African now. And then it means we have to think totally differently. We have to put everything aside to say, what is SA Inc.? You know, that individual who've now
Thank
lost.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Ferial, if
I hear
if
you.
I can,
Willie Aucamp, please come in. You can't eat sovereignty for breakfast, is what William is
no,
telling me. Huh?
you can't. But I fully agree with what Prof. William said there, that your sovereignty, in other words, your muscle, is totally dependent on your economical strength. On the one hand, South Africa say, don't bully us. But in the other hand, we say, hey, bully, please keep on giving us money. Give us money for aid. We must remember, first it is aid and then it is trade. If we lose our aid and our trade, our country got huge problems. I've summarized perfectly earlier on in this conversation where he explained the secondary benefits of having this trade with the United States. Dr. Joan van Niekerk, when I agree with her, the effect on the lives of people in South Africa and in the question of Dr. Joan, the children in this country, we cannot let ideological issues and us trying to portray us what a child will eat or what medicine a child will get. It is inhumane to do that. We need to understand what our strengths are, and we need to build our own strength in not only in South Africa build bridges, but also on the international terrain. We need to do infrastructure development with regards to our public relations in the international arena. We cannot go on. Yesterday, I was in a meeting of the Portfolio Committee on Agriculture, where the chairperson in that committee meeting said, well, if they want to take AGOA, let's forget about AGOA. That was the words. Let's forget about AGOA. I don't think that person thought it through. I'm not going to mention names, but we've got to protect this to the benefit of everyone. And we can see that in the plate of food that will be on the table of a child tomorrow. And that is the urgency in this.
Thank you. Well,
So
someone
thanks,
should tell Mr. Masina that hundreds of thousands of people. Please come in, DM. I've got very specific questions to you also from readers. So please come in.
Yeah, just a comment. I think the comment by Prof that we must consider reassigning or recalling Ambassador Rasool, I don't think it is well informed. If we will deploy based on demographics, I think that will be a wrong approach. We must look on the strategic nature of the country and look on who are the best capable, irrespective of whether they are white, colored, Indian, or Africans. If we'll take that approach, we will literally end up saying, let us have Africans in Africa being ambassadors. And I think that is not correct. And we have looked on a person who is matured in terms of international relations, the economics, trade relations, and I believe Rasool is a well-placed a representative of South Africa in US. The second point is, we have not said, let us cut relations with United States, but we are saying respect sovereignty of South Africa. We are building, we are sustaining this relationship, but it should not be a relationship where there is a big brother or a bully in a relationship. In this, we believe that we should treat each other as common countries that seek to build the development of the world. And therefore, this issue that we must forgo other laws or sacrifice our standing on other issues, it's not correct. We do need to look on issues in totality.
Thank you. Deputy Minister, final two questions for you. Maredi wants to know, like, where can you see the list of projects which you spoke about? So is there a dashboard? Many people asking that. And then from Johan Bosman, why has the Clan William Dam, after 13 years, not been enlarged? The walls not been raised 1 millimeter. So very specific questions for you there.
I know that starting with the last one, there has been a project of enlarging and deepening some dams. I would not know a specific one that is thrown in now, but I think because the question is there, we will get the area and make a follow-up on that. But we are working on ensuring that we build bulk water supply for South Africa. The list
and then
is
just a dashboard.
Yes, it's available in the website of Infrastructure South Africa.
Thank you very much. Willie Aucamp, one thing you would do if you were president, I know you're not, but just to end our conversation with both of you. Huh?
If I was the president, I would listen more to my partners in the GNU. I would have more interaction, and I think we must get to that point. So have respect. Together we can save this country, Ferial. I've got no doubt in my mind that we must work hard and we must work together and listen to each other and make every decision that we make in the benefit of every person in South Africa. Grow the economy, create jobs, and this country will be saved. And from the Democratic Alliance's side, we will do everything to achieve that.
Thank you very much. Prof. William Gumede, one thing besides recalling our US ambassador?
I think we have an absolutely great opportunity with the government of national unity, even if the way we can pitch it to the US, but also to the world. It's an inclusive government. It's not what it was before, a one-party dominant government. This is inclusive. This is, we're starting from a new and so on. I mean, that's an exciting way to have that conversation. So that's very important. But secondly, if I would advise a president, if you have to, if there's nothing else he's going to do, is to say, here's a great opportunity with the GNU to govern along a social pact approach. Now, when we always talk about, developmental stage, we've got social pact, but a social pact that is different from the past, a social pact that involves the private sector, and civil society and professional organizations, and of course with the GNU. It'll be very, very important to deal with our issues, and particularly, this US crisis also.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much to all three our guests and to all of you who joined us for talking about the state of our beautiful nation. You wanted a comment there, DM Zikalala?
Yes, maybe to close, this is the 7th administration composed of GNU, and therefore parties in the GNU should work together. But it is not a new government altogether. It is a continuation of a South African democratic state from 1994. Lastly, I fully agree with Prof that we need all sectors to come together and contribute in building our country. It is because of that reason that as the ANC, we have worked through Government of National Unity to ensure that this year we convene a national dialogue where all sectors will come together, engage on issues of building South Africa that we want.
Thank you very much. On that note, thank you so much for taking time in a very busy week, and may our country be safe and prosperous. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, guys.